how do we keep some of that person to person connecting in this virtual world, do you think?
I think that's interesting. And I've been thinking about this a lot too. And I think it's about how do we have to do the work ahead of time before the virtual event. Like, how do we foster those one-to-one connections, that serendipity that people would get at events that they're not going to get in virtual events? So, how do we foster those one-to-one connections? What kind of introductions can I make ahead of time? How can I introduce a solution partner to a member who might benefit from those solutions? Uh, it starts, I think, with thinking about how can we solve challenges for our members and our industry partners, right? Like when the pandemic first started, we were all consuming everything we could. It was like communication through a fire hose. Like, let me just get as
Right.
much stuff as I can. And now we're a few months in and we're a little bit more thoughtful and we're thinking about quality over quantity. So I think it starts with asking questions like, how do I solve problems for my members? How can I curate content? We don't need to create everything, but how can I curate content and bring that to my members? And also, what communication channels and methods and timing do they prefer? It's not just about the virtual event, it's about before and after. And that communication cadence and the type of communication, it changes, right? Like I work at a medical society. We actually tend to do a lot of communications on evenings and weekends, and that has worked for our members. But then in the first few months of the pandemic, our doctors, in most instances, were not frontline doctors because they're neurosurgeons, unless there was a hospital with a large or institution with a large volume of COVID patients, they generally weren't treating them. So then
Right.
we can start to communicate with them during regular business hours. But now they're starting to go back. And so that communication cadence changes
Mhm.
again. So it's just recognizing that and being on top of it.
Yeah, that's interesting of how it's not one thing. We're not in one new normal. We're actually in this kind of evolving moment where people are trying to figure stuff out. Um, in the chat, John German mentions that N10, another association,
Mhm.
they had to cancel their event and they decided not to do a virtual event because they felt like they would degrade the experience. That there's a certain that serendipity, those people coming together, all the hugs, all the things, and they just felt like if we do that, then maybe we're going to ruin the brand of the event for the next year because it won't be that experience. And I think that goes back to what you just said about all year long. And we have to think about what is an event. It's an intense time of engagement, but it shouldn't be the only engagement, right? And so how do you take the content and those connections and create something where maybe there's that peak, during some more intensive event, but you're thinking about it all year long as something that's part of why people are connected to your organization in the first place, right?
Exactly. I've been thinking about this too, that my neighbor and I were reflecting on how COVID has brought our little community together, that there are some positives out there. So I'm squarely suburban. I live in a cul-de-sac, and our neighbors, we were the kind of neighbors who wave hi to each other when we're getting our mail or taking the trash out. But COVID has really brought our little community of homes together. Now, every Friday after we all sign off, at 6 o'clock, we all come out and do a socially distanced party in our neighbor's yard, and we bring food and we help watch each other's kids. And when my neighbor had a health issue the other week, we took care of him,
Mm.
and it's been a respite for us. It's helped, it's restored us. And I think about how that mimics our member communities too. Like we were loosely tied together as a community of houses near each other, but we weren't truly connected. And you can think about that in some ways as your membership too, right? Like you were, you all have some commonalities, industry, job title, those sorts of things. but you're loosely connected in a lot of regards. So how do you bring people together in really unique and interesting ways? And then how do we continue that after the pandemic too?